coming up. What an excellent day for mispronunciation.
Mispronunciation.
Mispronunciation. That's what I meant. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Minute 50 of the Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist, minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. Okay, so our minute begins with Dr. Klein saying, "It can last for days, even weeks."
And it ends with a nurse applying a blood pressure cuff to Reagan's arm.
Oh, wait, hang on. Reagan? Are you sure it's not Ree-gun? I mean, we've only been doing this for 50 episodes now. We'll get to that. But for now, let's get back to the top of this minute here. What Klein is referring to here is what he believes to be a lesion in the temporal lobe of Reagan's brain. He says it's very common and can last days, even weeks. Now, from what I can see, a lesion, when in reference to the brain, can mean an area of damaged brain tissue. I at first thought it meant cut or some kind of open wound, but I guess it can also be an abnormal growth or just affected brain tissue. Strokes are a type of lesion, for example, which after talking with Keenan about how fragile and yielding the brain is, even more so than, say, Jell-O, that just makes me even more scared.
Well, maybe my Jell-O comparison is a little overstated, but you could pick it up, but maybe you shouldn't. Your own brain, thinking about your own brain. Don't press too hard when you're holding your own brain.
You can pick your nose. You can pick your friend.
Mm-hmm.
You can pick your friend's nose.
Right.
You can pick someone else's brain, but don't pick your own brain and don't press too hard.
Yeah, I never understood that you can't pick your friend's nose. Of course you can.
Yeah.
Try me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It just seems like a dare when a little kid says that. Of course,
try to stop me. Huh. Okay, so I guess being scared and uncomfortable is appropriate for this minute. This is a minute to be scared in. We've got a lot of scary stuff in this minute. But funny thing is, if anything can be funny here, it has nothing to do with Captain Howdy. Unless I guess you account for the fact that he's putting Reagan through all of this just for his own amusement, for the lulz, as the kids say.
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. I mean, that's really mean. That's almost worse than any of the other stuff he does to her.
Right?
Physical pain that he's doing there. That's awful.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, right, he could just go on full on possession mode. He could get right to the end of the movie, but he's taken his time.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I guess some people would say he needs time to sort of do his magic or he's becoming stronger through her, right, and get into that place. Yeah, but yeah, I wonder about these sequences. Is he just hiding out? Does he just is he here? Or does he go away somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just laying low, because if he's in there, then he has to endure some of this nasty stuff that I'm sure even if you're an ancient Sumerian demon of some kind, you don't like the kind of things that you're about to go through here.
Well, I mean, that raises the question of whether or not he can feel it,
I don't know.
I mean, we're gonna look at a later scene where Reagan gets hypnotized, and there's that whole idea of if Reagan dies, won't you die? And he says no. So I don't know. And then just given all the stuff that he does with the head twisting and the contortions and the vomiting and everything like that, I don't know if he can feel any of that.
But he can hear things, right? He can hear these giant loud clap, clong, clong, clong.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, he can definitely hear and see everything that Reagan hears and sees, right? But hey, maybe down in hell, right? Their choice of music, their style of music is exactly that. It's just horrible MRI sounds and dial-up tones and the clanking of pots and pans, and he's like, yeah, this is some good chamber music or something like that.
Do you have we didn't plan on asking each other this, do you have a least favorite? Do you have a noise that gets on your really gets your goat?
Oh, that's a good question.
I was dating someone once, and she had trouble, she didn't like hearing other people eat. That was it was oh God, I just don't want to hear slurping and straw noises and stuff. And I had no idea that was anything that could bother anybody. So I would just, blom, blom, nom, 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 nom. And she had to tell me please try to, keep that to yourself as much as possible.
That would be the easy listening channel in hell. Just people eating. It's like, I'm not even going to do it. Because actually, so tell the truth, Keenan, that's actually one of my, well, no, when I'm listening to a podcast, I'm putting myself in the hot seat right now. When I'm listening to a podcast and I can hear, or like, like any kind of like voiceover thing, and I can hear those like wet, mushy, mouth sounds and everything like, and I'm being so careful not to make any right now, just because I, called myself out. But yeah, there's things you got to do. Like, a trade secret is to eat green apples right before, which I forgot mine today. Great of all days. We're talking about like horrible sounds. So yeah, it kind of like sucks all the, the gross moisture out of your mouth. But yeah, there's that. There's, I don't know, like slamming doors is something that really bugs me. But it's like, I would almost even say it's like a, like not an unpleasant sound, but almost like a trigger almost. Like if you watch me very, very closely, like when I close doors, like I kind of like let them fall into place almost until the end, and then I catch them and then I close them really, really, really softly.
Yeah, I like doing that too. I don't know. I don't know if I guess I do have that thing with slamming, or not slamming doors for me, not like someone taking it and going full swing, but yeah, just sort of careless door closing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it always sounds louder than you intended to sound, right? Like if there's a window open, or if like there's an airflow or something, like, and then people are like, "Was like, hey, are you okay? Are you angry?" No, I just like, my hand slipped and the door slammed. And we live in a house with wood flooring and wood paneling walls, and everyone, is just echoing all over the place.
Yeah. So I'm a lecturer at college, and so I'm often in these big lecture halls with like sometimes 200 people. That's not uncommon for me to talk to. My big class is usually like 150 people. Sometimes it's up to 200, 240 people. And I have picked up this pet peeve that when I was a student, my teacher would say, and I was like, "Oh, come on, man, who cares?" but like the whispering when you're up there, because the way that the rooms are designed, like students whispering to each other is very, very distracting in a way that I don't think you could understand unless you were on the other side of the room.
Yes.
The room is not set up to buffer it exactly. It sort of pushes it towards you, but it's very indistinct. So my teacher when I was in college said, "Please avoid side conversations because you sound like little rats. You sound." I was like, "Oh, that's a hard way of putting it." But now that I've seen it, it is. Yeah, you hear people having, sometimes incredibly, sometimes they're goofing around or whatever, and and that could be like, "Oh, I'm disrespected" or whatever. I don't feel that, but sometimes it's like, even legitimate, like, "Hey, what was that? Do you have a pencil or whatever?" But it sounds like, and yeah, they sound like little rats. And that's what I like. That's what I sounded like when I was a snotty, 20-year-old. Go, come on, man, just move on with the program.
Now all I can imagine is like you're up there giving a lecture, and like way up high in the back in the little stadium seats. It's like, gosh, I really like this professor. He has a lot of great things to say. He's so brilliant and so wonderful. And you're just like, shut up.
Oh my God. You rat-faced bastards in the back. Yeah. And just to be clear, so in case any of my students listen, I have pitch it to my students to please listen to our show. But I try very hard to empathize with the students there. And like, if someone is on their phone, texting or whatever, while I'm lecturing, I've worked for years to try to be like, it's nothing personal. Some of them, there might be things going on. And I had a friend who in grad school wouldn't be able to pay attention to the lecture unless she was playing Candy Crush in her other screen. So she had a screen where she would type, and she had a screen where she was playing Candy Crush. And if she had forgotten that and didn't play Candy Crush, she would have trouble following the notes. So I was like, oh, okay, I believe you. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I've known, like back in the day, kids would get in trouble. They would be labeled as like daydreamers or whatever if they were drawing in class, right? Like if they were drawing like in the margins of the notebook or whatever, right? But that's actually just that's a way for them to process like what's going on. They are listening. It's just like I don't know. It's like an association of the hand and the ear and the eye or whatever.
Like some people would I fidget, I shake my leg, and that's just socially acceptable. Yeah, as opposed to someone doing something else on their computer or on Facebook at the same time. It's not socially acceptable.
Right. The one like the what would get me mad is if they're like if they're dumb enough to get caught, by which I mean, like you can hear the little typing sound because they forgot to put their phone on silent. So you just hear,
that is definitely one of my noise pet peeves in any situation, like hearing someone typing on an iPhone.
Right. Why does that sound even exist? Nobody uses it. Nobody needs it.
I don't know. And it's very, very annoying to me. That's incredibly, incredibly obnoxious.
Or the camera sound when you take a picture. It's like everyone puts that on silent. Nobody ever actually needs that. Like, and I was in class and I was trying to take a screenshot of something that I was going to project up onto the screen. And an idiot, forgot to, silence that. And so I'm just typing, and you hear, and for a second I thought it was somebody else. Right. But imagine like you're trying to like you see something you want to like you're on Facebook and you see like this really funny post and you want to save it for later, but you're on the subway train and you're like, I'm going to take a screenshot of this post and you take a screenshot and the thing makes the stupid camera sound. Everybody on that train thinks you're a weirdo, because you are pictures of people's feet, right?
Yeah, you are a weirdo. You left your sound on for some reason.
What kind of weirdo does that? Yeah.
Well, anyway, so yeah, perhaps Captain Howdy, I don't know, maybe he loves all these terrible noises that are happening. But I love the iPhone texting noise.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. And I love when I'm giving a lecture and the room is full of little rat-faced kids.
But don't get me started on these young demons' idea of music. Like, ugh. It's like new age music in hell. It's just like, bleh,
Exactly.
It's just people saying thoughts and prayers. It's ugh. Okay. So getting back to our favorite Doc and his wonderful bedside manner here, right? So we're even before we're in that room with all the noise, right? We're in Dr. Klein's office, I guess by this time we've decided it is. And he tries to assure Chris how common a case like Reagan's is, right? But I think he drops the ball here, even as he drops some foreshadowing when he says it isn't rare to find destructive, even criminal behavior. And is it just me, or is he saying it like he's trying to scare her or impress her? Like, hey, I want you to know what a big, scary job this is for me. I'm a real doctor. I'm dealing with real scary stuff. I'm really brave. Oh, yeah, and your daughter's really brave too, I guess.
Yeah, you were saying he's dropping that. I thought you were going to say he's dropping ash because, of course, remember, he's smoking as he's coming in here. I just won't ever forget. Yeah, I won't let that go. It's just so strange to me to see a doctor smoking in a lab coat.
Dropping foreshadowing, dropping ash, and dropping the ball in trying to appease and reassure Chris. Yeah,
right.
But so Chris gives an exasperated sigh, and whether it's at the situation or Dr. Klein's handling of the situation, who can say? Probably both. And then she says, hey, do me a favor, tell me something good. Yeah, can you tell her something good, Dr. Klein, please? To which our doc replies, don't be alarmed. If it's a lesion, in a way, she's fortunate. This guy has the same lighthearted optimism as Uncle Titosh has, right? Like, in fact, like I expected like Uncle Titosh to come in as a technician at some point. It's like, it's really funny. Your daughter, she's crazy. She's all messed up.
No, you don't understand. It's a brain. It just got holes in it.
Right. We're going to blow her head up like a balloon. We're going to drain all the juice from her brain, and we're going to put helium in there. It's going to be great.
No, those literal holes, like a mouse will make. It's fine. You see. You get it.
Yeah.
I guess you had to be there.
Yeah. But yeah, so she may actually be fortunate because if it is a lesion, all they have to do is remove that scar. Okay, some actual good news, right? The solution might be more simple than we thought. Okay.
I think this speaks to what we were talking about in previous minutes, like the idea that, okay, well, it's not psychiatry, which is difficult and complicated and doesn't work. There's a medical answer for this. So, cracking open not cracking open your daughter's skull. Let's be a little nicer. Sawing open your daughter's skull. Sawing open your daughter's skull and going in and removing damaged brain tissue. Like, that's awful. And of course you're scared,
Yes.
But it's medicine. It's surgery. It's not psychiatry or something cuckoo like that we wouldn't know if it'll work.
Yes. So, and in previous minutes, right, I kind of like made it a joke that these doctors are like shitting all over psychiatry, but it could very well be what would you call that? Like a psychosomatic or a physical, like an actual physical problem
Right.
that does need to be addressed. And back in this time, the only way that they can be sure is by doing this horrible procedure that is going to show the brain in like full rendering or whatever, I guess, so that you can like see all the little corners and everything like that.
Yeah, and you were talking about, and I'm starting this sentence without remembering where I was going. You were talking about, hold on, let me look here. I once, I heard from a speech and debate expert kind of guy, and it was like, this is what you do. You say, someone gives you a meeting, you're in a meeting, and they're like, here's our problem. And you go, okay, all right, the solution to your problem has 3 parts. Part 1, and you have the first part, and then you better just be thinking about part 2 and part 3 while you do it, because the rhetoric of that 3 parts, first, blah, blah, blah. Second, blah, 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 and third, it just makes you sound like such a genius, even if you don't have any answer at all, which is, yeah.
And third, see parts 1 and 2.
Wait. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. So you were talking. So Lester, you were talking earlier about how, like a lesion is a stroke is a type of a lesion, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's helpful to know that because, here he's explaining to Chris, like, how a small damaged part in her brain could make Reagan have a different personality or different aspects of personalities, right?
Right.
All of a sudden becoming violent, all of a sudden not being very good at this or having skills he didn't think they had before, which is common with the stroke, right? We've, I think we're familiar with like if a stroke damages, it frequently damages language parts of the brain, right? Language centers in the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen like, maybe you have these videos of people who, like this white British woman, I think it was, who had a stroke, and then she wakes up with a Chinese accent.
Oh,
yeah, it's really interesting. And at first, you're like, "Well, you're making this like you just can't fathom it, right?" This poor woman, you're like, "No, that's impossible." But then the doctors have verified, yeah. So she wakes up with a Chinese accent.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting, so, folks. Yeah, I mean, like I said it before, I said it again. Like the brain is still, I think, the final frontier. Like we still have no idea what is like inside our head, behind our eyes, in between our ears. Like that is well, I almost said that is crazy. Like
right. Yeah, that's the only way we can think to explain it. Right. Is like, oh, it's just nuts. We can't explain it, right?
Right. And like we talked before on this show about Mel Blanc, right? And Mel Blanc having a stroke.
Oh, right.
And him changing the voice of, one of his characters, Barney, on the Flintstones,
yeah, right?
I might have been incorrect back then. I think I said that he did change the voice, but I might have mixed up like which voice was the start of Barney and which voice was the one of them sounds like the Barney and one of them sounds like Bugs Bunny, and all I know is that after the stroke he used the other one because he couldn't remember that he had already chosen a voice for Barney.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't that his personality changed, it's just like that he completely forgot that like oh, that's Barney's voice,
right? And the muscle memory that's involved in the voice, right? It's like your voice is physiology, obviously, but then also you learn how you prefer to use your voice or what have you, right?
Right. All the little intricate like things that happen with your vocal cords and your tongue and your teeth and your lips and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. I've thought a lot about that kind of question because I have a naturally low voice and well, I don't know. I don't know if my mother listens. She's listened a little bit. So this is a story that maybe I don't want to tell in case my mother's listening. Okay. But when I went through puberty and started my voice changing, my mother and I were very close. And I had actually gone away from Las Vegas to Hawaii for the summer during my big growth spurt. And so then I came back, and this is a time, calling was expensive, et cetera. So, I hadn't really seen or talked to my mother very much for 3 months. And I came back and I had gone through this growth spurt and my voice had dropped, pretty substantially. I'm pretty close to where I was in my adult life. And it really bothered her, to lose her like little boy. And like, I'd be in the back of the car and I'd be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And she would like, oh, Keenan, your voice is so low, It was like, oh, and it really got to me, and and then not consciously, but I realized this all in retrospect. Like I started raising my voice to be, to put on this this other voice of myself. And so now I question that all the time. Like, I'm not sure where my actual voice is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really sure. So I don't know how to test it. My boyfriend is a vocalist and a musician, and I'm asking, like, how do I test, like, am I a baritone? Am I a bass or what have you? Like, I don't know, because his voice is naturally higher in conversation, but he's a baritone.
Right.
Yeah. So I really don't know. Like, I worry sometimes, like, is this my real voice or I don't know. And then sometimes I worry, am I putting on this low voice idea, because I'm a self-hating gay, which is true. My issues with myself as a gay kid in the late 90s. Like, I think, maybe I'm like lowering my voice to be more masculine or whatever, all that stuff.
Well, everybody loves you, Keenan.
Oh, well, that's very, very nice. But,
yeah.
Like, I'm certain that my aversion to the color pink, where I don't want any pink in my house. I don't have any pink clothes, even though I would look good in pink with my skin tone. Like, I know that's because of my, my
you
upbringing. Well, thank you. Like, you look really good in like a burgundy luster. I think that'd be good for you.
Oh, okay. I have very little burgundy. I have it's all blues and blacks. So.
That's how I am. I'm all blues and greens. I think you'd look good in olive. A good mustard on you would look great.
Ooh,
yes.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, in my own life, I'm like, no bright colors, no pinks. I think that's certainly because of my my late 90s gay aversion to myself, for sure.
Wow.
That just stuck with me.
Hmm.
Anyways.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
I don't know what my voice is.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And he's doing a podcast, folks.
And then like you listen to your voice all the time. I try not to listen to my voice, but like the idea of like it's you're I don't know how many hertz you are, but in your own head you always sound lower.
I'm a lot of hertz. I'm so many hertz. No.
But in your own head you always sound lower and more masculine than you do when you're recording,
yes.
right? No matter what you're doing, right?
Something has happened ever since I got into voice acting. Ever since to the point where, like, even when I started this podcast, it is no longer a surprise to me. I think because of like the voice acting and all that stuff, where like I'm just, because of my job, I'm forced to listen to my voice to, like when I'm editing and when I'm sending stuff off, right? Because guys, when you're like, on the lower tier of voice actors, you're doing all of your own like engineering and editing and stuff like that, and you send it off to to the people, and so you gotta make sure that like what you're sending off is just right and it's the exact thing that you want. And so like, yeah, very, very quickly, I guess also same as like seeing myself on camera being like, oh, I look like that. Like I remember in like high school and college being like really, really repelled, you might say, by how I sound and look. And then
totally
you just kind of like had to, deal with it, like especially when you are literally like selling yourself as a brand, right? Selling your voice, selling your face, selling your body, and and all that stuff. You gotta be like accepting of who you are. But even now, like I still have this little tiny voice in my head about people talking about like people pass me and it's like, oh yeah, you look really great, and he's like, oh, you look like a Disney prince, and he's like, oh, you look like this, you look like that, and I'm like, oh, thank you very much, but like there's a little tiny part of me that's like, I don't believe you, right? Because we're getting way off the beaten path here, but I mean, Keenan, my nickname in elementary school and middle school was Quasimodo.
No.
Yes. And it's because I have kind of like this, folks, you can't see me. Well, I mean, like if you find me on the socials, you might be able to tell, but like this forehead that's kind of mismatched, I guess. It's like one side is concave and one side is convex, and you can barely notice it, but like it's there. And when and kids notice, right, right. And so like that was all of my childhood and like puberty time. Like growing up was like it's like Quasimodo. So
kids are terrible.
Yeah. Or Sloth from the Goonies, like, how you going? Like that thing.
Listeners, just go out and punch the first kid you see today in the street. just tell him Lester sent you. How awful.
I mean, even, you know what, like, I remember like sitting with an adult. It was my best friend and like his uncle. And we were sitting on the couch and we were watching some like Looney Tunes cartoons. Oh, no. It wasn't Looney Tunes. It was Tom and Jerry, right?
Uh-huh.
And they had the bulldog, who's always kind of like, being bothered by the two. And he's kind of like
Spike.
defending. Yeah, Spike, right? And in this episode, Spike had, a little kid, a little mini Spike, right? And this adult who's sitting with us just casually is like, oh, that little dog kind of looks like Lester.
Oh.
And I'm like, huh, okay, all right.
Oh, and he meant it probably as a nice thing.
How can that be nice?
It's a cartoon. It's a movie star.
He's a bulldog. He's a bulldog with a bulldog face.
A lot of people like bulldogs. Yeah, but no, I'm sure he wasn't like, oh, let me get this kid, right? He's not going out punching kids. But now we have our little Captain Howdies in our heads talking about these things no matter what. Because Lester, you now more like you're saying, people say, oh, you look like a Disney prince. You Lester now, today looks more like the prince at the end of Beauty and the Beast, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's the one that everyone points out.
Exactly. Exactly. So no matter how many times people say that to you, you'll always remember the little.
I never told you that, Keenan, right?
No. I'm just that's what you.
So
look
you
like.
just came up with that on your own.
Yeah. So I'm saying. So like no matter how many times people say that to you, you're going to remember that you look like the little bulldog, little mini Spike right? The bulldog.
As loud as they are about like I guess Prince Adam is his name, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, yeah, I'm just Spike Jr. That's what I am. That's Captain Howdy's favorite music channel is Childhood Trauma. It's just the thoughts like swirling around. He's like, yeah, this is like, I put this on when I'm cooking, when I'm making a meal, helps me sleep. It's just people be like, nobody loves me.
Nobody loves you. Right. Despite all the people who say that they do. Right. It's terrible. Right. Yeah. Terrible.
No, laugh at you.
And this is the brain. This is what the brain does to you. It's not your friend.
Love that brain.
Just pick it up and squeeze it.
Yeah. So maybe sometimes like press really hard on that brain. Just like, shut up. Oh boy. Okay. But yeah, so Dr. Klein is trying to reassure Chris and saying like, yeah, if it is a physical problem, it might be easier to fix. All we got to do is remove the scar, remove the lesion, right? Great. But again, folks, as we know, this is just like Lucy with the football, right? We get a little bit of hope from the doctors, and then it gets ripped away. Okay, so from here we get another sound bridge. This would be a J cut, correct, Kenan?
That's right. You got it.
Oh, look at that, folks! I'm learning. Right. Oh my gosh!
Because we as we see Chris, we start hearing the sound from the next cut, from the next shot, right? And then in this case, it is in the new scene, right?
Yes. Right?
Also, this weird thing going on where because Dr. Klein is smoking, it's a very subtle sort of thing. But we have the sound coming in. We have this sort of puff of smoke that starts to wipe over Chris's face. And then as it does, then we have, I don't think you can do this as you're designing these shots, but it's sort of a nice thing that the editor can find. We have this sort of match cut between this puff of smoke and then this kind of gleaming stretcher that we get in the next shot as it comes in.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. That is really cool.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, that's like, that's just these nice little accidents, and it wouldn't be something that you're trying to find necessarily when you're in the editing room with these editors. And Friedkin was like, oh look at that, that works, great, perfect.
And I love that because it's like, yeah, of course you would use something that is like in the natural world, like a puff of smoke. It's like, okay, yeah, the doctor's smoking, but like almost as like this like set dressing, almost as this like special effect transition type thing. Right? Like I really like that. That is cool. Oh man. Okay. Well, speaking of using one thing and it looks or sounds like another thing, right? Getting back to this sound bridge, Keenan, like this one is especially disturbing because the sound that leaks in from the next scene is so jarring and so incongruous. At first, I thought it was drums, like someone was on stage doing a drum roll or a rim shot. Right? Like if you go back and listen, and suddenly he's like, it's like, it's all we have to do. And, there's hope. And yes, we will remove the scar from your daughter's brain. Right? And suddenly that adds a whole new layer to Dr. Klein, what he just said. Like it's all a big joke, right? Like, see, I told you it was funny, right?
You'll see.
Yeah. Now, we come to find what that sound actually is the hospital bed, which Reagan is lying on in the next scene, being rolled across the floor. And that made me think, wow, okay, they really are going to great lengths to give us the sound of that bed. I mean, I know everything makes a sound, but when you're making a movie, sometimes you intentionally leave out sounds, which you feel might be like distracting or not, or just like not important to the scene. Right? Like you're trying to create. And so I don't know. I feel like another director might not bother with the sound of the bed here and instead put in some like ominous music or something. But again, we have the harsh reality of Friedkin's world, right? There's no music in the real world. The real world is full of noise and harshness and or silence. And none of those are comfortable.
Right. Just to, not necessarily relevant to The Exorcist, but I guess sort of as a thought experiment. But nowadays in 2023, a lot of music in horror movies is not actual musical score, but it's sort of tone, it's just sort of like a right, like that. I hope that sounded good in the mic. I was doing a little dance here. Right, that just sort of tones. And so that's become the convention now in horror films. So that's very, very common. So if you are a fan of horror movies today and you're watching The Exorcist for the first time or looking at it in deep dive here, notice how we don't have any of that stuff. And what's creating the tension and discomfort is the heightened sounds of everyday objects of the real world. And of course, there is music here, polymorphia and tubular bells, right? That is scary, but oftentimes, so you can imagine again taking this scene, giving it to a sound design student at a university in 2023, and saying, "What would you do here?" Say, "Well, it's a horror movie, so there should be some some tone or whatever, to be unsettling." And then just to reiterate what you're saying, the only thing that you are recording to be used in the finished film when you're on set is the dialogue. So you're not recording any of the sound effects here. So the sound effects that are put into a movie are put in post-production specifically. Right. So it's not like an artifact of, I was trying to record what Reagan might have to say here and we got all this other stuff. No, that's the sound designer specifically putting that in. And that's really starting to become, sound design as its own art here in the early 1970s. Again, we talked about this before, but with Walter Murch's design for The Godfather, it started becoming like its own thing here.
Right. So it's not even, it's even more of a choice, right? So it's not even like the case of leave that in. It's like, put that in.
Create it. Yeah. Go and make it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah. So they had to go and find some clankety clank noises to put in here. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I don't think we talked about Foley before. But Foley is the type of sound effects that you make. And so that's the kind of thing. I think these videos are fascinating. You can go and just type in Foley, Foley, and you get to see what people are using to make these sounds of bones breaking. It's often like celery. A punch is often like punching a steak or something like that. And then crazy ones that you don't even necessarily think about. I think I saw one recently, which was whipped cream coming out of a Ready Whip nozzle. The shh. And I think that was, if I remember right, that was like Tibetan sand type stuff. Where you have sand and then you sort of brushing sand.
Interesting.
And it was like a shh. And for whatever reason, an actual can of Ready Whip doesn't sound as good as whatever they decide.
Tibetan sand. Wow.
If I remember correctly. But you go and you all can go and look at these videos because they're fascinating. And there's even some old timey ones, with radio artists who used to put on radio shows, right? And the cliche is the thunderstorm is a giant bandsaw, and you go
right. Yeah. My favorite, I think, is, and I don't know how accurate this is. You can tell me if this is like a joke because it's coincidentally sounding the same, or if it's actually what they used. But no, it can't be what they actually used. But dragging a metal chair across the floor and it's sounding like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park.
I mean, that makes some sense. They had to. Yeah. I mean, that's the one that when I talk about Foley design to my students, it's like, how do you figure out what a Tyrannosaurus Rex sounds like? Right? An alligator doesn't roar, right? So you can't just go out in the real world and get it
and record T-Rexes, right?
So they had to do a bunch of things, and each roar is different, right? So they don't just make one roar and then repeat it. Like some are in the rain, and some of them are more aggressive, and some of them are more cautious, and sometimes they are Mack trucks, kind of, but then they're mixed in with like panther
Organic
growls.
sounds,
And
yeah.
it's sort of a mixture of all those things to get this thing that, when you see Jurassic Park for the first time, which is one of the formative experiences in my life, seeing Jurassic Park for the first time and hearing that T-Rex sound, and you're like, that's exactly what a T-Rex sounds like, even though I've never heard it before. And it's terrifying.
Yeah, that is imprinted on my brain.
Right.
Right. And the part where I didn't press down. But yeah, no. Or like the sound a TIE fighter makes. Like that's like the latest meme is people will like have some like kid screaming or like a cat meowing or something like that, and they'll just really, really quickly cut to a TIE fighter, and they're like, oh yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
One of our sound design teachers here, John McLean, who runs a sound design company here in Las Vegas, the assignment that he would give them is like, okay, all right, students, your homework is to go out and design a fire goblin. And what does a fire goblin sound like, right? So you have to think abstractly. You can't just find that somewhere.
Right. And it'd be like the most obvious choice would be just to go and like record like a crackling campfire, but you don't want to do that. You want to do something a little bit like more, I don't know, out of the box.
Yeah, where's the wetness there? That doesn't sound like a goblin. Yeah, where's the crackling fire? Yeah, no, wrong. Get out of kick you out of class. Get out. No, I think it's just a wonderful sort of the artistry of sound design, which really gets me. It's something that I don't have I don't have an ear for. I don't have those skills, but like whenever someone shows me what they've done, like, whoa, and this stuff is just impacting you on this like primordial level, right? So these sounds here of all these scrapes and these we hear metal on metal and we don't know where they're coming from. So it's like in some ways even more scary than say like, a lion roaring, which we we're primed to be like, oh, that's scary. But like this stuff, we can't even place what it is.
Right. And I think, we talked about that before is like the unknown, right? Like there's a different type of fear when you're presented with, like you say, Keenan, a lion or a gun or something like that. But when there's something that's like, I don't know what that is,
right.
And it could be sight or sound or feeling, right? Like, that popular Halloween game of like putting your hand in like this box with your, with your eyes closed and feeling the peeled grapes and being like, I don't know what that is.
It's the witch's eyes.
It's the witch's eyes. Yeah.
And this is the witch's brain and it's just your own brain.
Right. See, no magic here, folks. It's just your best friend's brain. Oh, we tricked you. You thought it was the witch's brain.
No, it's just Veronica's brain.
You didn't press too hard on it, did you?
No, I'm sure she's fine.
She's got that new math test tomorrow. But okay. Speaking of Foley, guys, like I'm holding back on this until it happens, but there is some pretty interesting Foley stuff that happens later on in the movie when stuff gets spooky.
I think that's why I'm particularly. I think that's why I'm particularly talking about sound and the voice here because I did. We do these episodes in batches, and so I'll watch them in 3-minute chunks or 4-minute chunks to sort of. But then today, when I was rewatching these minutes, I kept going because it was really catching to me, and then so pretty quickly we start getting changes to Reagan's voice, and so I think that's why I'm thinking so much about it today.
Yeah.
It's no good.
Ain't no good. But yeah, so. Back at this minute. So again, here we have this expression or this absence of expression on Reagan's face. So we're in the next scene, right? Reagan is being wheeled in on this hospital bed cart thing. Yeah. I forgot the word for hospital bed for a second.
I called it a stretcher earlier, which is wrong. You're right. It's like a bed she would have in her room that they're transferring her over to, right? Right.
And there's this expression on Reagan's face which could show resignation. It could show hopelessness. It could also show that she is holding it in. She's trying to be brave for mom, right? How do you read this expression, Keenan?
Yeah, what Linda Blair's doing for me, the first thing that I sort of think of is like, oh God, she's been. We're about to see a procedure, but it's like she's been through so much today. Like it's like just another thing. So like maybe
this
at the
isn't
beginning
the first
of
thing of the day. This is like
it feels like it to me. Like maybe she had a little more reaction to it at the beginning of the day, but it's like another one of these or And I was thinking about how it's a really strong performance again by Linda Blair. We just have to keep underlining it. It's not just some kid performance, but so I wanted to highlight that before I say what I'm going to say here, which is like. being exhausted in a movie, I think, is one of the most fun things to have to play, because you're just like, it's exhausting to make movies.
Yes.
So when I was on my first feature as an actor, and I was in just about every scene once the movie starts going. So we were shooting like 18 days. And, I wasn't really prepared for it. That's the thing they kind of tell you about working on a feature as opposed to a short, because a short you might work really hard for 1 or 2 days, on your days off, and then you go back to your normal life. But on a feature, it's exhausting. And so when we finally get to the part in the movie, because we're shooting in roughly chronological order, which is a luxury you don't have in most movies.
Right. Not normally. Right.
Not normally. Yeah. Yeah. So at least for this big chunk in the middle, we were shooting roughly chronologically. And by the time our characters have been staying up all night, and I got drunk, and my character, I mean, like by the end of it, I'm just like exhausted. It was like, oh, great. I don't have to act. I can just like rely on what my body's telling me that I am exhausted. This is very, very tiring.
I really like those those shots or scenes of like sleeping or like falling asleep, or just like being in the bed and just kind of like, maybe waking up from a dream, or like when the phone rings for Chris and she's got to pick it up and she's got to act like really tired or something like that. Right? Unless it's like the first shot and I'm all excited and I just had like a Red Bull and I'm like, oh guys, I can't wait to be in this movie. Right. And they're like, okay, we want you to like act like you just woke up. And it's like, I did just wake up. I had 3 Red Bulls.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but no. I hear what you're saying. I like those scenes too.
Yeah. We have these shots of Ree-gun, and again, the movie, when we're in these hospital sequences, it's going for like extreme realism. Like our camera is sometimes positioned. We have this shot that's at the base of Ree-gun's bed, and we basically get only the top half of her face, and like we're looking up her nose and we're seeing her eyes, and it just like, what we would be seeing if we were at the base of her bed, and not necessarily where a narrative film director would put his camera. Right. It sort of feels like we're really intruding upon this real procedure.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, like to speak to this scene, the whole thing just seems off. It feels uncomfortable, right? Like even to the point of having someone like mispronounce Ree-gun's name, right? The first word we hear in this scene is her name, but this guy pronounces it Ree-gun. And it's like, what do we think this is really? Like it works either way. But do we think that this guy, this Paul Bateson, made the decision that his character, this technician character, was going to purposely say her name wrong as an added little like nothing is right in this room, or did the actor just like never hear anyone else say the name and on set and he fucked up? Like, what do we think?
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? So so imagine that we say this actor, right? He's acting here, so we should, I'm just trying to be clear. Like, if you're dealing with someone who's a non-professional actor and they're in the movie and they're acting, like we should treat their performance, like they're acting, right? Because we have, again, this is like the 4th or 5th person that we've highlighted here who is a real person and not an actor, and Friedkin is interested in that, as we'll talk about, especially with this person. And so like this actor comes in and says Ree-gun, and I can imagine, because we don't know the answer to this, where this is coming from, I can imagine Friedkin going like, oh, great. He made a mistake. That feels more real to have somebody mess this up, right? Because you could also see a less confident director being like, oh, that's a mistake. We're going to use another take. I'm going to correct him, right? I'm going to say, oh no, it's Ree-gun, and we're going to cut out this quote unquote mistake. But that mistake feels, not only does it feel like something that would happen in the real world, but as you say, it really like hurts our feelings and amongst like all this other stuff, that's going on. It's like,
it's like she's Ree-gun.
Just one more thing, right? One more thing to go wrong for this poor little girl.
Yeah, right. And like you would think with such a scary, like invasive procedure that like in the real world, they would go to the trouble to introduce all of the technicians. Like, hi, I'm Paul. I'm Dr. Klein's friend. I want to show you the machine, whatever. Like, what's your name? Oh, Ree-gun. Nice to meet you, Ree-gun. Don't be scared, blah, blah, blah. Right. But it serves to remove Ree-gun, to isolate her further, like you said, like that, she's got all these doctors and these technicians in the room with her, supposedly on her side, but they don't even know her goddamn name.
Right.
Like the only one who knows her that well is separated by a pane of glass, right? And so like if it were me directing this bit, I would even go so far as to have like Ree-gun speak up and try to correct him. Like it's Ree-gun, not like so that she could like have a victory in this scene. Quite the opposite. Like it would be like an attempt at reclaiming some power in this powerless situation, right? That's not my name. My name is Ree-gun. And then having that quickly be like brushed aside like it doesn't matter. Like, your name doesn't even matter, little girl. You're in this room and we're going to do these horrible things, and your mom's out there and she's not even here. Like, she can't help you. And that might even be like a little nice nod to like what the demon says later is like, I am no one. Because now she is no one. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, we're talking about what we would do as a less confident director than Friedkin, right? And less quite as sure. Like, we want to be sure we're highlighting all these little moments. And for Friedkin's like, it's just the tapestry of what this experience is. It's just how it is, right? Yeah, but think about that also about Linda Blair when we're in this like the sequence that is I don't want to say improvisational. That's not quite the thing I'm trying to say, but like Friedkin has given them leeway here and there to stray from the script or to add things or be in the moment, right? And we've seen that. But like, for Linda Blair to not like have a reaction to, all right, Ree-gun, she's just like, oh God, like I just can't even respond to that. I can't even have that little bit of energy to do the scene that Lester was thought experimenting. Yeah.
Right. Either this has happened before or so many other things have happened before that this is just like, I don't even care anymore.
Right. And that's, we've been talking a lot about our childhood traumas today. But
yes.
mine.
What an excellent day for childhood trauma.
And like, isn't that the whole Exorcist is childhood trauma? Yeah. With Reagan and Damien. Yeah.
It's about childhood trauma, and then it gives you childhood trauma if you see it.
Yeah. But, I have a hard to pronounce name. My name's Keenan. I've been saying that on the podcast, but if you look up, in the description, it's Kynan, which is hard to pronounce. And I've gone back and forth on this a little bit. I like that I have an unusual name. I don't know about you, Lester. I like that I'm not another Kevin or Tyler or Jordan or something like other kids in my class where they'd be like Jordan B and Jordan S,
Right.
So I'm glad for that. I've only ever met a handful of Keenans in my real life. We're like, oh, I'm Keenan. But mine is with the Y. And I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like the misspelling, because then we have these conversations that if it was just Kenan, it would be easier,
I personally love it.
Well,
and it's like, when you call misspelling, I call the perfect spelling. That is your name.
And I have looked up, like, are there any other Keenans? And I don't know how they pronounce them. I think that they do pronounce them in, some of these people who have become famous enough for me to Google, like there's Australian rugby players and that kind of thing, that they might be Kynan. I'm not sure, but that's how people tend to, when they look at my chart at the hospital, say Kynan.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, talking about childhood trauma, my name is unique, and it also sounds like a lot of things. Yeah, folks, you know what I'm talking about.
Lester.
And people, like, to this day, I'm almost 40 years old, Keenan, and I'm meeting other people who are almost 40 years old, and they think it's the funniest fucking thing. As if they were the first ones to come up with it. They're like, "Oh, is your first name Mo?" Like, wow, like how many years of comedy school, guy, did you take to come up with that? Oh my God.
What do you think about like Uncle Fester? I'm sure people call you that.
Oh, that's a billion times.
But Uncle Fester's pretty cool.
He's like my favorite character in the
right. So how sad is that when they try that one on you?
But I also know what Uncle Fester is, and so like I'm like, oh, he's my favorite TV character. But you're comparing me to him. It's like I don't want to be compared to him in real life. I love Christopher Lloyd, but
right. Yeah. So as I've
Uncle
grown
Fester,
up,
Mo Lester. I've gotten Hannibal Lester.
Okay, that hadn't occurred to me, but all right.
Yeah. That one I had to give points for. I was like, okay,
the first time.
the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. So nowadays, I don't get upset when someone mispronounces my name. I don't get upset at that with the first name, but it does still bother me when they mispronounce my last name in a way that I don't know why. It's still irrational. Like if they don't know me and they've never heard the name before, but it's Diaz, D-I-A-S, and of course Diaz, D-I-A-Z, is one of the most common surnames in America. Like right. I think it is in the top 10 or top 20 like most common surnames. So it shouldn't bother me that people are like, oh, I'm assuming it's the same as that, but it's not. It's Diaz. It's Diaz. It's the Portuguese version of it. But
right.
Yeah, so I don't know why that bothers. It's still irrational. And I was on a game show, and they they took great pains to pronounce my first name correctly, but the announcer, so the entire time the host is like, oh, Keenan, wonderful, lovely. But then I got home and the announcer, who was not on set when I was on the game show, says my last name wrong. I was like, oh, you.
Oh. You were almost there.
Yeah. Yeah, because the person who was filling in for the I'm, these are our fans. Okay, I try to be cagey about this because it sounds like I'm bragging, but I was on Jeopardy. So I was on Jeopardy, and I'm not bragging that I'm on Jeopardy. I lost on Jeopardy.
But your co-host is a celebrity, folks.
No. So then the Jeopardy community is great, and like I feel like I can talk to them, about what it's like to be on Jeopardy. But like when I tell other people who haven't been on Jeopardy, it becomes a whole thing, and it feels like I'm bragging too much because it's a hard show to get onto. Obviously,
it is.
But anyway, so Alex Trebek is so now I get to go back and tell the whole story again, but use real names. So Alex Trebek and the contestant coordinators, he would say my name, Keenan. Oh, Keenan, tell us about this. Perfect, wonderful. And then on set, so if you haven't seen how Jeopardy's filmed, if you haven't gone and visit them, there's the announcer Johnny Gilbert, but he no longer comes to set. So that voice at the beginning goes, "This is Jeopardy. Today's contestant." Sorry, he's not on set. So Jimmy from the Clue Crew, it's so much easier of a story to tell when I'm not just being cagey about it. So Jimmy from the Clue Crew does the in-person, this is Jeopardy, and here's our first contestant is a film student from Las Vegas, Nevada, Keenan Diaz. So he's there in the room, and you tell him how to pronounce it. But then, when Johnny Gilbert pronounced my name from his home studio, he mispronounced the last name. I was like, "Oh, Johnny Gilbert, America's sweetheart." Yes. But anyways, there's that.
There is that. Okay, so this guy, elephant in the room, or serial killer in the room.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, Paul Bateson. We're not going to do a bio of this guy. He's not deserving of a bio, in my opinion.
Right.
We spend way too much time remembering the names of the killers rather than the victims. So F this guy. I wish we could somehow erase him from the film, but I guess we got to talk about him. So
yeah, I mean, he's become part of the legend of the film, right? People talk about this a lot. There's always with movies like this that are so impactful, like Poltergeist or this one, there's often, let's say, like this aura of like, oh, this is a cursed film or something like that, right? And this is part of that kind of spooky, creepy periphery.
Right. So we're taking this as part of the tapestry of the mythos of this film and nothing more. We're just gonna.
And it affects Friedkin's career, right? So Friedkin starts making decisions based on this scene, that will impact him for the rest of his career.
Right. Yes. So. Okay, so this guy, Paul Bateson, is a convicted murderer, former radiographer. In 1979, he was convicted of the murder of film industry journalist Addison Verrill. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Verrill. He was sentenced to a minimum 20 years in prison, but he was released on parole in 2003, which ended after 5 years. Wikipedia says released on parole after 24 years and 3 months, released from parole after 5 years. What does that mean? Does that mean like after 5 years of parole, he just walked?
I believe so.
I think. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
like you report for 5 years to a parole officer and they monitor you and there are restrictions and things. And then after that, I think you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so 24 years behind bars, 5 years on parole after that, and then that's that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Okay, and that's just for the murder of Addison Verrill.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, prior to his trial, even prosecutors had implicated him in a series of unsolved murders of gay men in Manhattan. These were killings he boasted about while in prison, and which he himself brought up at the sentencing. However, no additional charges were brought against him. These murders were thought to be done all by the same person because they were so similar. The bodies were chopped up and put into trash bags and thrown into the Hudson River.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Wikipedia gets a little confusing here. It says in one part that he boasted about these murders in prison all the way up to his trial, at which point they were like even mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But then a little later, it says that while in prison, our Friedkin, came to visit him, and Bateson admitted to the murder of Addison Verrill. But then he said that the prosecutors were saying that if he admitted to the other killings, he might get off on a lighter sentence, which he's like considering. Which like a lighter sentence to admitting to more murder, that is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. He like that almost sounds like they really didn't know who did the other murders, and they just needed somebody to confess.
Right. So I'm going to jump in as the liberal bleeding heart pansy whimsy who's about criminal justice reform. Yeah, it's sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes it muddies the solution to these murders. So we don't have much evidence that Bateson is a serial killer, right? So that might be the case, that we have a serial killer here. All the evidence is for the murder of Addison Verrill. This Variety reporter, as Variety is the industry newspaper for Hollywood. Right. So he was a New York Variety reporter, and so that's open and shut. But then the only evidence that we really have about Bateson is circumstantial, that the disposal of the bodies is kind of similar, and that they don't even know who those bodies are. Unfortunately, they've never identified them. Yeah, that
I could not, because I was reading about that the other day, and I was like, how do you not identify? Like how? Like to this day, they still don't know who the victims were.
So then we have to add on, this really awful stuff about like this is amongst the gay community, which is different from our modern day gay community. Like today, still there are people, young people who run away from communities where they're not welcome, right? And they come to places like San Francisco, New York, LA, et cetera, right? And then they find community there. But now think about that in the 70s. So sometimes these people would leave and they would find a community, but they would still not necessarily be out, open to themselves. And they might be using the falsified names. They might not have told people. So you might go missing, say, in Birmingham, Alabama, and then go to New York and then end up unfortunately murdered by this serial murderer, whoever he was. And then you're the people who are looking for you and never know that you've gone to the West Village in New York. They don't know where you are.
Oh, okay.
So it's completely different sort of situation there. And then, so unfortunately, prosecutors are allowed prosecutors and police are allowed to lie to you to extent that, criminal justice reformers today are like, well, we should really figure out how much this is. I mean, it is possible that this guy, I don't want to be too sympathetic to him. He is a convicted murderer and might have murdered several people. But it is possible that he had misunderstood what the prosecutors were offering him, or the prosecutors were leading him, towards, admitting to crimes he didn't commit, which is unfortunately relatively common for people in jails and prisons to admit to things that they didn't do. And that later on we find the DNA evidence that says it's impossible this person committed the murder that they had confessed to.
Right. Yeah. Even today, you're seeing stuff on like YouTube and TikTok of like people, being convicted, being sentenced, and like after like 40 years getting out because it's like, oh, we made a mistake.
Right. Where they had signed a confession 40 years ago because they're under all this pressure and it's all this strangeness, right, of where people are telling them one thing and they're also separated from their families and they're living in this, this crazy situation. So I don't know that that's what happened to Bateman,
to this guy,
Bateson. We don't know what happened to him there, but it's not so out of bounds that someone would say, hey, I'm going to imply that I committed 5 or 6 other murders, right? To us, it seems impossible that we would admit to any murder that we didn't commit, right?
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that apart from the bleeding heart liberal part of it about, putting innocent people behind bars, from the criminal justice standpoint of it, this is a problem because we have muddy the water. Say Bateson didn't kill these 6 people. We don't know. But if we get him to admit to it and then that accidentally lets off the real murderer, who is now scot-free, the case is closed. That's a problem, from a justice standpoint. Right. So, so it's so messy and we don't know what happened, but he certainly did kill this poor Variety reporter. And like you said, very wisely, I think that, even though true crime has become this huge genre, right? With cases like Serial, or even, even before that, shows like Dateline that just every week it's a new true crime.
Or Dahmer is the latest one that everyone's flocking, and they're idolizing him.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that this Dahmer miniseries Ryan Murphy had with Evan Peters just won the Golden Globe for that. I think it's starting to become an inflection point where you start seeing people in the industry talking about we've been doing it all wrong, especially with the case of real life people, right?
Right.
Like it's different when it's Hannibal Lecter, and you can.
I was just gonna say, like
it is. Hannibal Lecter wasn't a real person. This is fictional, so we can like stan Hannibal Lecter, right?
Right.
I think it's maybe look at yourself a little bit, but I guess like we do it with Dracula or something like that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But like, with the real
it's removed
person.
enough to where it's like, oh, Anthony Hopkins, brilliant performance, Hannibal Lecter, like brilliant character. And I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to make Dahmer like the next Hannibal Lecter. It's like, you can't do that. Dahmer's a real person.
His victims are still alive. And like, and then maybe, what is that called? Oh shoot. There's a book that was really popular a couple of years ago in like literary, like Murders in the White City or something like that. I can't remember it. But anyways, that's like historical serial killer.
The Devil in the White City?
Thank you. Devil in the White City before we got any emails. Yeah. Like Devil in the White City. And it's like, well, okay, maybe that's a little different. Like this is historical and these victims no longer have families who were like mourning for them, But Dahmer was in our lifetimes, I mean, there are people who are still reeling from this. So I think people are starting to talk about it in a different way. And I think that the Netflix show got in hot water a little bit because they were trying to say that, okay, we're different because this Dahmer miniseries is from the point of view of Dahmer's Black woman neighbor, played by Niecy Nash, who's a great actor. And like, okay, that's an interesting perspective, right? Because that's part of the Dahmer case is that this woman had told the police, hey, I think something's going on with my neighbor, this weirdo.
Right.
I see guys going in. I don't see them coming out. He's odd.
Right.
But
then like the right way to do that would be you make her super interesting and you make her like the one that you want to follow and you want to say, it's like, oh, what a great, performance. You don't make Dahmer interesting in that case.
I think so. Yeah. But they were, so I think that they were promoting themselves as having done that, which turned out not to be the case, that she's not in every episode and, she's not the main character. But they're like, okay, look, this is about how this Black woman was ignored by the police because they see this regular Black woman, poor Black woman or lower middle class Black woman. And they're like, we don't believe you. And look, here's some white dude, right? Who is weird and has stench coming out of his apartment and guys going, but he's a white dude. So we listen to him. Right. But that's not, but I don't think that's what the show, I haven't seen the show. So I usually don't like criticizing shows I have not seen.
Right.
But from
what same here, like I haven't seen it. Just full disclosure. But like just hearing everybody at work clamoring about Dahmer, and people like talking about like not just the show but the character of Dahmer. I'm like, guys, like that, like we're studying World War II, we're studying the Holocaust, which is recent, like enough. Right. This is even more fresh. Like you said, Keenan, like his victims or like the families of his victims. Well, they're also victims, I guess. Like are still around. They gotta watch this show, or they're not gonna watch this show, but like they gotta know that people are talking about this show. That's gross. Yeah,
and they cast this. Sex symbol. Evan Peters is like one of TV's sex symbols right now, and to cast him as Dahmer, is odd.
Yeah,
like I don't know what they're thinking there. So like they're women at home who are like, oh, look how sexy Evan Peters is as Jeffrey Dahmer. Like that's not helpful at all. Yeah.
No.
So, anyways, back to our serial killer that we have to deal with. But I was talking about. Unfortunately, like we don't know a lot about Addison Verrill, which is sad. Like, so this is the murder victim, and then you try to Google him, and his writings are hard to find. I couldn't find any on Variety because Variety is a newspaper, and I'm sure I could find them if I had gone to the library, and like actually done that work. But it's hard to find his writing, and you have to listen to his friend, a fellow reporter, a journalist reporter, entertainment reporter, Arthur Bell, who wrote about this, and like was like, hey, this is a real person here, right? So that's kind of the tricky thing with true crime is that you're focusing on the suspects and the murderers, and it's hard to focus on the victim.
Yeah, and what sucks is like if you Google Addison Verrill, probably the first thing that you're gonna come up with is like how he was murdered and who murdered him.
Right. So, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, at the end of it all, like we know that he killed Addison Verrill. We don't know for sure about the other murders. But either way, speaking of like romanticizing people who shouldn't be romanticized, Friedkin takes this information and he makes another movie. He makes the film adaptation of this 1970 novel called Cruising, about a police officer going undercover in the gay community to catch a serial killer. So I guess he was basing it on both the book and the like string of real life unsolved murders, which Bateson was possibly connected with. He even went so far as to include the actual bar at which Bateson had met Verrill, which of course he fucking did. He's freaking right. But like there is a story I was reading about how like he went to visit Bateson like in jail. And I think that's what you were about to talk about, right, Keenan?
Well, yeah. So Bateson is, again, one of these people that as Friedkin is working on the movie and getting it together, he's like, oh, let's just use the real people. You all are more interesting than an actor who's going to go and do this, right? Especially that when you're like doing this complicated radiology procedure that we're going to see in the upcoming minutes, right? He went and observed real radiology procedures, and he liked the radiologist. He liked his assistant, Paul Bateson. So let's just have you all do it, right? Yeah. So he had met them before and was, as he has been with Tom Birmingham
and with Vinnie Russell and with Vasiliki Maliaros.
Right. He's meeting them. Yeah. And he's like, you all are so interesting. We're going to put you in there. So to sort of back Friedkin up a little bit about this, like imagine that you have been fascinated enough by this real life person that you're like, then put them in the most famous movie in the world and the movie that, makes your reputation. And then you find out that they're a murderer. So, I mean, I understand Friedkin's like, obsession with that to some extent, right? So
knowing who Friedkin is.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm saying like even if that happened to me, I'd be like, well, geez, like I don't know, like I was, in some ways, directors are seduced by actors, right? In the casting process, it's like, oh, I'm so interested in you. That's so wonderful, right? You're such an interesting person. And then to, in the editing room, you see these people again and again and again and again and again.
Right.
And then to hear that they're a murderer, I don't know. I would at least be interested enough to. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Like, would I be strong enough to go like, I don't want anything to do with you anymore, or
maybe just to like get some closure. Like, hey, like I thought I knew you. Like we worked together on a film. Right. Like, what the fuck is all of this?
Yeah. So then, so he has the combination of sources: his relationship with Bateson, his working relationship there, and then this novel called Cruising. And he sort of puts them together. And as you say, like using the real life locations, like the bar, which is the mine shaft, I think, or something.
The mine shaft,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like using that is what am I trying to say? It's understandable in some ways, and then also very Friedkin-esque, right? Like to put your stamp on it, this novel, and say like, oh, I'm going to add this sort of Romana clef, like these keys from real life to open up the story.
Yeah.
So a little bit about Cruising. So this is a movie that is very controversial, and Paul Bateson gets us into these. Like all these things we talked about so far in this show a little bit, the idea that like Paul Bateson was a ticket seller at a porno theater in downtown Manhattan, like we talked about. Oh, there we go. Like it's sort of like it was weird reading up on his story this weekend and like seeing all these other connections. But Friedkin is putting out this movie Cruising, and it's very controversial. He gets a Razzie nomination for Best Director, like we've talked about before, and what the Razzies are like. And it's controversial at the time for both straight communities and queer communities, because it's controversial from straight communities because like, why are you making us watch about a serial killer within the gay community, and it's set not just in the gay community but like in a subculture of the gay community in the leather bars, right?
The leather bars,
right? That apparently Addison Verrill was not necessarily into, and then which is another part of the tragedy of it. It's not like he was like into roughness or anything necessarily kinky, but meets a guy at this bar, and then his version of his story is put into this movie, and then you Google Addison Verrill and it's like, oh, look at Cruising, this story about leather bars in this subculture, right? So he's going to always be remembered as being part of that subculture when apparently he wasn't, right? And so like straight people were like, oh, what a gross sort of movie, and like, look, like I don't really like this is uncomfortable. Why are you like empathizing with these gay men who are into this like rough S&M culture? And then queer people, right, gay people are like, this is not us, like to show like this specific subculture, dudes who are into potentially like rough or dangerous sex, and saying that is the gay community, when that's not, that's just part of it, right? So it didn't really sound satisfy anybody from either end of it. And he got some of the worst reviews of his career.
Wow.
Now it's been sort of reevaluated. I think that because I teach queer cinema in my classes, and like when there's one gay movie a year, it stands in for all of gaydom, right? Like when there used to be one black movie a year that had to stand in for every black family and every black business and everything, right? And I think now that you're like, okay, there is a subculture of leather bars and there is a subculture of S&M and that kind of thing, but it seems less like it's trying to indict an entire people. Right. So it's become reevaluated. Some people like it a whole lot, but it certainly begins like a lot more criticism of Friedkin, and it begins. His movies become more unequally reviewed. People are like, "Oh, this is back to form," and then afterwards, it's like people tend to like pile on about like, "Okay, Friedkin's at the end of his career now," and he's had some highlights, right? So we have Cruising, and then we have To Live and Die in L.A., and there's but between those movies and then afterward, it's pretty hard. People start to really kind of delight in like seeing the downfall of a great director.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh. So that's the story of, I guess, Bateson and also the rise and fall of Friedkin.
Yeah, that's how a lot of his biographers put it. Right, this is the beginning of the end of his great period.
Dang.
And Cruising is part of this. Once there's a lot more gay visibility in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, a lot of gay activists like Vito Russo, who founds GLAAD, the watchdog organization for how media works in the gay community. I'm of two minds of it. It's like, okay, Cruising, here's a movie about gay people. That's great. That is a step above most movies which pretend, even in 1980, that there are no gay people in New York City. Just craziness like that, right? They just pretend that they don't exist. So in some ways, it's a step forward. But of course, as gay advocates would point out, when all of the movies that we have are not just like negative stereotypes, but like serial killers, up in the early 1990s, they start writing about that in full force and being like, after The Silence of the Lambs and Basic Instinct come out, they're like, hey, great, gay visibility, sure, but it doesn't matter if they're all serial killers, right? So like being a lesbian in the early 1990s in cinema meant that you killed men. Like that was the only representation at all.
Wow. So it's you're not even like portraying harmful stereotypes. You're portraying monsters.
Yeah, you're portraying myths, right? Yeah, they're what straight people's fears are. Right. So it's beyond like, oh, gay guys can't throw a ball and lesbians like tools or something like that, which are harmful stereotypes. But it's like these are the first that you're hearing about gay people in movies is that they are out to kill straight people. Right. Yeah. That's a problem. Yeah. So, that has changed a little bit, but so, you can look at individual movies. Silence of the Lambs, fantastic movie, right? But the bad guy thinks that he is a transgendered and is murdering women to steal their skin.
Right.
So again, when that's the only trans person, as Dr. Lecter says, he only thinks he's a transsexual, but like that's a cop out, right? That's a cop out. He's a trans person. Right. Yeah. So that the only trans person in movies, 10 years before and 10 years afterwards is a serial killer. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
So, and then we also had people talking about directly how Cruising led to violence. There was the writer of Philadelphia, Ron Neiswaner, who's a screenwriter and advocate. He said that he and his boyfriend were walking in New York and they got gay bashed, and they specifically got gay bashed, and their attackers were talking about like, we saw Cruising and we know what you all are like,
Oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
Terrible things like that,
And when you say gay bash, you mean like
attacked,
physically attacked,
physically attacked. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. So so there, you look at individual movies, you're like, oh, this has individual merits, but that's why organizations like GLAAD exist, right? About like, what is the grander picture, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Movies are definitely like what do you call it? Like a snapshot of history, but then they can also be like not just snapshots, but they can be like fictional, nightmarish paintings as well,
right? And they impact the society. They don't just reflect; they create the society, right?
Right, exactly, right. So some of these images can be very, very harmful. God. So now in the movie, Bateson's character is actually I'm talking about in The Exorcist. He's very calming, very good bedside manner, trying to soothe Reagan as she goes through this scary process. It's weird knowing what we know now. That calming, soothing voice like hits a little bit different, but like in the movie, it's supposed to be seen as like, this guy is gently guiding this little girl through this scary operation, right? He's calling everything out as it happens. He's like, hey, like this is what we're doing here. This is what we're doing here. Like the way Dr. Klein was like, oh, look, this is your temperature right back in the previous.
Yeah, isn't this neat? Look at this thing, Reagan. Like, yeah, isn't this cool? This is what we're going to do. Even just a digital thermometer, he's taking the time to explain.
Right. Like, and there's even like in later minutes, like he's gonna like remark like how like the little sticky things are like, oh, very sticky. It's like, this is cold. This is, like calling it out like before, like, and like it's like I've taken some, like child psychology classes in my day. And it's like, yeah, when you validate something like that for a kid that's experiencing it for the first time, it's like, hey, isn't this weird? Isn't this like different? Like that kind of like gives them, this sense of, it's like, oh, okay. It's like it's okay that I think that this thing is cold, or it's okay that I think that this thing or this sound is weird, or this texture is like sticky, this doctor thing that they're sticking on me, right? Because the nurse said it or the doctor said it, like he knows. Okay. All right. So I feel a little bit better. Right. So that's exactly what he's doing here. And also this is the first minute that we notice, like if we look how pale Reagan looks, and especially like her lips look really dry and chapped, right? Like we see them a little bit closer later, but I always thought she had like bite marks at this point, like, or at least like huge cracks, right? As if this were the first stage of like the big transformative like makeup process. I don't know. I don't know if this is like stage 1 or stage 0. I don't know if we've started the transformation yet, or if this is just like, it again, like how insidious it is. Like, but all I know is that it doesn't look like when we had that close up of her on the bed, like when she's talking to mom, like about Burke Dennings and stuff. Like that's not the Reagan that we are seeing now. Right.
We could probably go back and look. This might be stage 2 or something of the makeup that Dick Smith is putting on, because they would, a makeup designer, again, like makeup designers don't necessarily get a lot of credit of what they've done, like sound designers, until the late 1960s with those Planet of the Apes makeup effects. Right. And but what they do, they do think about like day to day. They don't just say like, this is the look for Reagan and that's it for the entire movie. They do it by story day by story day. So this might be a little further along even. We have to go back and look at it. But yeah, this is the first time I notice it for sure. Right. Yeah. We start to see her cheeks being a little more sallow, and she looks, frightfully pale.
Yeah. Well, that is everything from my notes. Keenan, is there anything that we missed in this?
No, I think we got a whole lot of gross stuff.
Yes, a lot of this is an uncomfortable minute. But hey, guys, good news. Don't worry. The next minute. Geez.
There's only there's only how many minutes do we have left? We have 70 minutes left.
70 minutes left. Yeah.
No, 80 minutes left. Jeez. Gosh.
Well, it's this new math. Folks, this has been another excellent Exorcist Minute. I've been Lester Ryan Clark. You can find me on all the socials as Lester Ryan Clark, and you can comment and tell me if I look like Prince Adam from Beauty and the Beast or Quasimodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame.
He looks like Prince Adam from Beauty and the Beast. Wow. When he's shaved, for sure. Yes. When he doesn't have a beard. And I have been Keenan Diaz, and you can find me on Letterboxd and Instagram as Howdy Keenan, Kynan.
We also have a Facebook page for the show, The Exorcist Minute. So like and follow that for updates. And we have a listener group. It's called Compelling Conversations. So, come and join, and then you'll be in here with us. And you can post memes, interact with fans, talk with us. We're also pretty active on there. And we already got a lot of cool people in there already. Lastly, if you like our show, the best thing you can do for a podcast that's just starting out is to hop on over to your iTunes or your Spotify and leave a little 5-star review, and that'll help us reach more people and keep growing this cool community. All right, Keenan, I think that's it. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Folks, until next time,
the power of Prince Adam compels you.
I'm never going to get over that. Howdy, Keenan. That's so perfect. That wasn't for the show, folks.
Oh, no, I would say howdy all the time. I talked about that a little bit. I think we were talking about, like I moved to Las Vegas and I was like, well, I'm in the West now, partner. I was 8 years old. I didn't know anything.
I just want to see 8-year-old you with the same face that you have in a 10-gallon hat, like your hands on your hips.
Right. Line dancing as we did in gym class in Las Vegas. Yeah.